Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode on Let's Talk Dispatch on my channel, The Raspy Dispatcher. Not gonna lie, everybody, I'm a little tired. It's been a long week at my call center. Hopefully, yours was a little more or less painful than mine was. But I am very excited to talk to my guest today, Executive Director at Mountain Valley Emergency, Keely. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring her on. Hello, Keely. How are ya?
Hi, darling. How are you?
I am tired. As I told you when we jumped on here, first thing I woke up, I was like,
I'm gonna need a minute. I'm gonna need some coffee
right? What's
and
that
some
Lizzo
various other
song?
things.
I'm gonna need a minute. That's how I felt.
Turning down my
So,
radio so we don't get like tones while I'm sitting.
oh yeah, then my trauma response is gonna be like, no, I'm not at work anymore.
Where
What's
this is my day. This is my day.
it's my day off. It's my day off. Start shaking on the interview.
In the corner, rocking back and forth.
Did you see the rest of the dispatcher? Tones went off and it was weird.
Totally a strange moment I had. I don't know
It-
what happened.
right? But it was a tone week, man. I don't know if everybody else had the week that we had at my center, but I swear I felt like I was putting out priority calls like every day. I felt like it was rough.
It was bad here. It was the last tour that the other side of the schedule was on. I looked at their call stack. I sit here at my work desk and I have the CAD on my screen so I can see what they're doing. And it was just medicals, priorities, medicals. I don't know what was happening. It must have been a moon phase or something.
Right? Sometimes I just go, I'm just like, I'm about to wake up my Siri. Sometimes just be like, hey Siri, is it a full moon? Like I'm just confused.
It's true story. It's out here.
Well,
It's like crazy.
well, thank you so much for reaching out and wanting to come on the show.
Of
I
course.
really appreciate it. Super excited about connecting with dispatchers, especially those who are still in the field, still in the mud
Hanging in there.
every day. So tell me a little bit about yourself, your journey, so everyone can know you a little bit.
So I started as a baby dispatcher in 1999. So I just want to
Hi.
remind you, it's a minute
Well,
ago.
yeah, I was 9. That's if you need a reference.
Way to make me feel better, man. Yeah. So I had joined our local rescue squad in '96 when I graduated high school. Shut your mouth. Uh, and so I started there, and I had ended up in an argument with the dispatcher on the radio. It was really, I asked for a medic unit. I wanted to upgrade our response on scene. The dispatcher kind of gave me a hard time about it. It's like, look, I'm on scene telling you what I need. Your job is to get what I need. And after that, I went and filed a complaint and all that sort of stuff. And the captain very pointedly came down to the rescue squad and like threw the 23-page application at me. And he was like, if you think you could do it better, apply. So I did. And that's sort of how I get to where I am. I was actually in paramedic school. I was doing all of the fun EMS stuff and ended up in the dispatch center. And, I don't know why I stayed. Like, that wasn't, mean, I don't think anybody really, maybe there are some people in the nation somewhere that say I want to be a dispatcher when I grow up. It just wasn't ever, it was always like a stepping stone. So I was like, I'm going to do that while I'm going to paramedic school. This is a great idea. And I just ended up staying there. And I don't know if it's because I loved what I did or if it was, getting stuck in the mix because you're now making money and you're getting benefits and you got a pension. Or maybe it was both because as much as I love to be like, what was I thinking? I'm still here. So obviously I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I was stuck around and I even left another center and came to another center. So, I guess, as I started getting into it, I realized how expansive the world of 911 is and that it's not just umbrellaed in a police department in a back dark closet room somewhere in a basement where nobody sees me or yeah, it just, there's more to it. And I started becoming fascinated with how that might have looked and even maybe at a state level or maybe bigger than that, it really intrigued me that there's all sorts of different parts to it. There's radios and there's telephones and there's CAD systems and all sorts of fun things. But like working under a police department, we didn't really get to play with the back end so much. But like as I started to expand, I was like, oh, this is really neat. There's a lot of stuff that goes into just making a 911 center. It's not like the phone rings, you answer, and you send people, which is really what I think most of the general public and even some of our first responders in the field believe that we do. It's really
Mhm.
like just answer the phone and say, how hard can it
So
be?
true. Yeah.
And you start getting into it, and you end up having like a love hate relationship with it.
That is very true. I love the fact that you got into this like on a petty pedestal. Like, okay, thank you for printing that out. I didn't want to waste my ink, and just going in and then it, and then getting into the field and loving it. And I totally agree with you about 911 being expansive and just they're so broad and if you're not in it, you really have no idea what's going on. I mean, one of the things that I say often, probably too often, is that I went and got my degree and I got my master's in criminal justice, but we never talked about dispatch. So then when I went through my academy and I started applying for jobs in the field and I found dispatch and stumbled into it, I was in my academy and I was like, why aren't we talking about this
Right,
in higher ed when we're talking about the criminal justice system? A, because it's so important, but B, letting folks know when 18-year-olds who are trying to figure out what they want to do with life,
right.
what the options are in this field because 911 is so expansive. You come in as a dispatcher, move your way up, and now you're an executive director. I mean, the options are there
They're
to
there. You
do.
just have to
Yeah.
dive in.
Yeah, dive in's definitely the word. um, so I only dispatch police. I don't have any medical background with dispatching in general. Um, would you say, as someone who worked in the field with medical and someone who probably has more experience with the medical side of dispatch, um, that it's harder or the same, or like what are the nuances with medical dispatch versus maybe just police dispatch?
So to break that out a little, I think being in the field certainly allows you. I'm a visual person,
Mm,
and I like to be able to see things and understand that
mm,
before I dispatch it. So a lot of times when I was working for Rutgers University, I demanded from my captain that he put me in the field one day because they kept putting me in the EOC during major events. We got like 40,000 people there for football games. And I'm like, no, no, no. I need to see the outside because I need to understand what they need from me before I can make it work for them.
yeah.
And so I think that coming into it, I sort of already understood radio traffic on the other side. I sort of understood what that was like. But the other thing that it did do is we're restricted to whatever the guide cards are telling us. Like you
Mm,
have to follow the
mm,
script, and they do that for liability. It takes the liability out of the dispatch, which I totally respect. But then there's sometimes as an EMT, you're kind of as you're questioning the caller, you're like, well, hold on a minute, this sounds like it could be this, and you're really not supposed to go off that guide card a little bit. But every now and again you catch yourself because you're like your EMT hat falls back on and you're like, oh wait, that sounds like it could be this, like I've seen this before. And you don't want to drive them in that direction, but sometimes you unfortunately do that because you're already thinking what is needed on scene instead of what you just need for that dispatch in that 5.
yeah.
So it definitely makes that harder to be able to put your dispatch hat on and put your EMT hat on and kind of interchange them. But it's also beneficial because you may think to ask a question that a dispatcher who doesn't have a medical background may not have asked. And again, it takes you off the guide card, so it's not like you're doing anything you're not supposed to be doing, but
Mhm,
it's it's helpful sometimes to sort of lead the caller like, hey, that could be a AAA. That's what that sounds like. And you're like,
mhm.
oh, well, hold on, let me ask these questions this way, and maybe that'll trigger something that gets an extra response. So that being said, the different nuances, like you where I came from, You did it all. You were call taker, dispatcher, like you answered the phone and you dispatched. There were sometimes that I answered the phone, dispatched, there was no crew in the building, and then I left dispatch and went and answered the call. So um,
Wow.
yeah,
Getting
so
your steps in.
yeah,
Jeez.
now you're really in it. So but I have to say that in that umbrella, because you're doing all of it, I feel like sometimes that system can tend to work very well because you're interacting with all of the units at once. But then I also feel like it's so hard to, okay, I this is what the cops want, this is what the EMTs want, this is what the paramedics want, this is what the firefighters want. And that can you look like an octopus half the time because you're you're trying to get everybody everything that they need. You're not doing one discipline. So it's
Mm.
great because you get a lot of experience really fast. But when you're training, that becomes, you're like, I'm really sorry, but you have to do it this way for police officers and this way for firemen. And it's
Yeah. I talked to a friend of mine who does it all, and they told me that their commands for if they're working the police side versus if they're working for the fire side were different. So sometimes they would like flip flop, like they're working, I don't know, they're working police on the front half, now they're working fire on the back, and then they're just like stuck a little bit, like, wait, what's the code? Like, because it's
right.
all so different. And someone who follows me on Rossi Dispatcher messaged me. They're going through training, and they're like, "My soup told me that. What was his words exactly? My soup told me that this is an easy job to do, but it's the hardest job to learn." And they sent me like this picture of this binder that's like super thick of just material that you have to go through, and that really resonated with me because it's like I remember going through academy, being super nervous, like taking my first hot call, um, and just working through it all. And now, like, a hot call drops in my ear, and I'm like, okay, yep, there it is. We're going this. Here's the next question. Okay, all right, we're on the okay. Like it's just so routine. But when I was first starting, it was like, oh my gosh, like I don't know, I'm gonna mess this up. I don't know what's happening.
I think I
Um,
spent a solid 3 months like, am I ever gonna figure out what that means? Is
yes.
how do you learn that? When I started, we had one computer terminal, and you had to like toggle through the screens. Now they have 8 different computer terminals,
Yeah.
computer monitors, and yeah, so things have changed considerably.
Yeah. And speaking of change, I mean, we joked about it, but our age difference, but that's kind of one of the beauties in 911 is that we have folks who have been doing it and changing the game from, when I was not even out of high school yet. And now,
Rubbing it
um,
in.
and now, now we got all these young people coming into 911, even younger than me, um, getting into this career early, which I all for, especially since this career can be entry level, and you can be successful and get the benefits, get the pension, and
Sure.
build wealth early. Um, which is one reason I'm like, apply, we're hiring. Um, but what would you say, like over the years, is the most stands out the most in regards to changes in dispatch?
I mean,
Um,
technology.
technology.
Technology. When I started, I had a dot matrix CAD screen. It was literally the black screen with the blue like writing that we learned in high school. Because when I went to high school, we had a computer class, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like what they experience now, where they're handed computers when they're 5. It's completely different, So we came in when I came in, it was that dot matrix CAD, and probably within about 3 years, we started going to like web based looking CAD systems. We also had a reel to reel tape, like our audio loggers were not, they were reel to reel. So every morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, we would have to stop it, rewind it, pull that spool, put it aside for anything that might come in for discovery or anything like that, and then pull another one that was now in its expiration phase, put that
Uh,
in, tape it over, loop it over, and then like play it, make sure nothing got caught in it, and like slide the door closed. And it was this big, giant cabinet looking thing off to the side. So technology has definitely, like, I can tell you, being able to find callers now. I mean, you use some of the technology today, and it's plotting before it even hits your 911 circuit. Now
Yeah.
we have that technology. Like, I know that call's coming in and that person's up on the highway before it even comes in. Whereas before, you're asking these people, where are you? And they're like, I don't know. And you're like, great. Okay, let me get creative to try to figure out where you are. Like, the things that we would have to do to find a caller when I first started versus now, it's incredible. It's just incredible, the leaps and bounds and changes. And the other thing, like you mentioned, that I see aside from technology is the the people that are coming into our centers now don't necessarily always want to be a police officer when they grow up.
Yeah.
And that's
Mhm.
really important. When I started, I remember having a conversation with a, captain sitting in his office who didn't want to even smell the dispatchers. And I asked him, I said, why can't I go to like a career fair at the school? And he was like, nobody wants to be a dispatcher. They want to be cops. And I was like, but I didn't start my career that way. Like, I didn't want to be a police officer when I grew up. Like, you make
Yeah.
it seem like it's a bad thing, but we may be able to nab that generation or that gap of people. It's a small gap that don't want to go to college, that don't want to, but it's
Mhm.
2 weeks of training and a CPR class.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if I had known that when I was 18 years old.
I say that all the time. Like, if I would have just got in here a little earlier, you know what I mean? Like,
Right. Like,
oh man.
the conversation needs to change. I mean, it's starting to change now, and you're seeing that now. But I mean, this is now, I'm 23 years in, and it's only now starting to change. I'm only now
Mhm.
starting to see people who I get resumes, and it doesn't, don't get me wrong, the vast majority, like 80% of my resumes are still want to be a police officer when I grow up. But I'm starting to see those like handful that trickle through every time we do a hiring that says, hey, I'm looking to just expand my career in public safety, and I think this would be a really good way to help my community, and this would be a really good way to kind of get started doing that. And I'm starting to see that conversation shift a little bit, but I feel like we're so hidden from the world. It's really
Mhm.
hard to drive that, to let you know that there's opportunity to be had within our centers.
Mhm.
We just recently did a whole segment, which I think if you caught a little video clip that we're doing with one of my friends who's a filmmaker,
Mhm.
because we need to show that we're more than just, people who didn't become police officers one day and then one day are going to be police officers, are going to be a fireman. Not saying that you can't do those things too, but just imagine what we could have harnessed if we just drove that a little bit more into, this is a career option. There are
Mhm.
places to go. You don't have to stay in the 911 center. You can
Mhm.
go create CADs that would work better for somebody like me because you know
Yeah.
what I need, because you've
Yeah.
used it before. Where before we were dealing with companies who had no idea, nobody had done this. So we're building things from scratch, basically. Now,
Mhm.
imagine we could have people for 5 years and then they go off and build what we need. They see
Yeah.
what we need and make it better for us. And I just think that's an incredible, like, that's a niche of people that are very specific that could start
Mhm.
expanding that space for us. And I think it's incredible that it's starting to change. It needs a little bit of a kick in the ass, though.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, like, I'm definitely that person. Like, I'm a little weird because I always knew I
You're a
wanted to go.
dispatcher.
Well, yes, um, but I always knew I wanted to go into the criminal justice field. Like, that was the goal. I always knew I wanted to be in there. I wanted to do like probation. I wanted to work with kids. So I always knew from a very young age that I wanted to be in this field. So I was gonna go be a cop. I was gonna go be a cop, do it after I graduated. Kind of fell into social work. Was still trying to coach and be in the basketball world. So it took me a while to actually apply and get into the field and like, oh, I have these degrees, maybe I should go use them. It took me a
Well,
little bit, but it's so true. Like, if I had known that, if someone had had the conversation with me about dispatch and the impact I could have, um, compared to same as level as an officer, as a firefighter, all the same category. What do you want to be when you grow up? Like if we put dispatch in that bubble, you probably would have got me at a younger age, to be quite honest, or at least fresh out of college. Um, and I think right now is a really good time to be a dispatcher. I think even in the last 5 years, I have seen so much more pushing us into the front, which I know some dispatchers like, no, 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 keep us hidden.
The whole reason I'm here is because I don't want to be seen. Yeah.
But I
I do.
have seen more, more pushing us to the front, more shows, more, sometimes we don't always appreciate the movies, but, it's still getting out there. 911 emergency, even the corny ones, like it's still putting the thought.
Recall.
Yeah, the call. Oh Lord, the call. Halle Berry, girl. We are upset.
We
But
respect you
genuinely,
for
like,
trying, but we have some
uh,
questions.
we have some questions. But even the poorly portrayed ones make people go, "Oh, 911 dispatcher. Let me Google." Hopefully they find my page and follow. And then, but it gets people, reminding them that, like, oh, yeah, the police don't just teleport,
No,
or the firefighter doesn't just teleport. Someone has to initiate that call. Um, and it's super important that we do talk about it and we do shed light on those who are doing the work, because we need more dispatchers.
yes, the world needs more dispatchers.
Yes, we really, really do. um Another thing that I always think when I'm talking to folks who have been doing this much longer than me is that I don't know if I could do this job the way you guys had to do it pre-technology.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like in my head, doing the job back when technology was less is like a 12-hour shift in manual mode. And that does not sound appealing
that's pretty much
to
what it
my
was.
mind as a dispatcher. And it's just like, it's insane. Like the map books, okay, you really don't know where you are. I really need to know my geography as
Yep,
if I was, in Friends, Joey stepping in the map to tell you, like, yeah, I know where you are. Is it this, this, this? Yes, okay. Like
yep,
us who have been in it in the recent years are all very map cat heavy. Like we know geography based on our map. Like I'm not rolling around my city being able to know every, nook and cranny. um, I think the way you had to know it back in the day.
making me feel old.
No, I do not mean.
Oh, no,
I,
it's
I,
okay.
I, these are accolades I'm giving you. Like I think that because it was different back then, which is why it's so easier now. You know what I mean?
I don't know
Like,
that it's easier now. I would because I don't want to because like let me tell you something. The PTSD is real in this line of work.
yes, yes,
But so I don't know if it's easier.
mhm,
Finding people has become easier.
yes. Technology is
You
easier.
don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to like beat yourself up about the person that was screaming in your ear. Now 20 years later, did I do everything I could to find that caller who was never found? Type of thing.
Yeah,
So we have that. That's what became like that's what lightened the load a little bit. But I feel like everything is so heavy with what we do. We're
yeah,
in those moments from the moment that person discovers what they have. We're in that moment. Like we're with
mhm,
them and we're basically talking them off their ledge of whatever horror they're enduring. We're there until somebody can physically help them, and that's like handicap, like it's a
mhm,
huge handicap. And so I remember like because I had field experience, but I remember like driving around on like either my break or like my days off where like I would go and ride the borders and get familiar with my buildings. Now I grew up in the town I started dispatching in, but then I
mhm.
came up here. I came up here 17 years later
Yeah,
in a foreign environment all new technology. This center was far more technologically advanced than the center I came from. I mean, we were still picking up phones where I was, and they had like
Mm.
headsets and like computer screens that you touched, and I was like, what the hell is that thing? Like, how do I answer it? So there was just like just a complete difference in like a shift in that technology. Obviously, that center has come up through the ranks as well too, and it was only a matter of time. Like everybody's starting to get on board with the technology that's in space.
Yeah.
But it's
Mhm.
like, but the one thing that doesn't change, the consistent, constant realm of dispatch is the heaviness. You
Mm.
have this heaviness that's kind of like, you had a hell of a week last week, and it takes you days to come out of that hole.
Uh,
You know,
yeah.
and that's hard, especially when you're working nights, or or if you, I don't know how you guys rotate. We rotate days and nights here, and you
Mhm.
know, it may not be as bad on the night shift because hey, things, everybody's sleeping and everybody's minding their business. But like on the day shift, we've got like four highways that roll through here.
Oh, no, no, no.
Right, exactly. So it
That's
just,
how it was at my first agency, yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just, and it just gets heavy. And it can be heavy from call volume. It can be heavy from the types of call. It can be heavy because, the first responders on the road are giving us a hard time that day because nobody ate their Wheaties. Like, I don't know. Like, it's like
Yeah.
whatever it is, like it can just get heavy sometimes. And, whatever bit of technology can lighten the load is also extremely helpful.
Yeah, I didn't even think to make that connection, in regards to technology and, the weight we carry. So true, technology does help with that because we're able to find people, we're able to get people help quicker, saves more lives, all that, and they all really intersect and connect. So thank you for making that connection because honestly didn't even think about that part of it.
It's a
Um,
little PTSD call of me because I couldn't find the caller. And if I
yeah,
had just had the technology that I had today, I would have been able to find that caller. And I still to this day have no idea what happened to that caller.
wow,
And that lives with you, and a
yeah.
lot of the calls live with us as it is anyway. But just imagine that one little thing could have changed everything for that particular caller. And
Mhm.
it's just that,
Yeah.
just a small, insignificant detail. But of course, I wake up, brush my teeth, and think about her. She has no idea. I mean, again, I
Yeah.
don't know what happened to her. We're going to say things are good, and she's
Mhm.
good because that's what I'm going
Yes. Yes.
with. And, you know, but she has no idea I think about her every day.
Yeah.
A
It's
lot of
very
people, yeah,
yeah.
and that's just one piece of technology that could have fixed that for me.
Yeah.
He was on a
Mhm.
prepaid cell phone.
Yeah.
Woman,
But she's fine now, she's
yeah,
fine now, she's good. Um, but that it is true, like, I know a lot of, I current dispatchers, aspiring dispatchers, they all, connect with me, and I do a lot I try to talk a lot about, mental health and, self-care, and it's okay not to be okay, and dealing with tough calls. And I think, and tell me if you agree, but I do think we are, as a culture, um, first responders in general, getting into a swing where we are acknowledging that we as first responders do have trauma. Everyone, especially including dispatchers, has trauma. We have more access to peer support. We have more access
yeah.
to counseling than maybe, before, in this
I didn't have anything
career.
when I started at
Okay.
all. I
Yeah.
wasn't even invited to debriefings. We
No.
had a small child that had died, and the debriefing I got was my captain Swinger, he was a sergeant at the time, swung open the door and he's like, "You okay?" And I was like reading my book, like nose in a book, and I like look up and I'm like, yeah, yeah, I'm all right. All right, just checking. That was my debriefing, and I wasn't included. Like they had, everybody and their mother was invited to when the CISD teams came out. I wasn't even invited. I wasn't even a thought in that chain. Now we are. And I really
Mhm.
think it's because the people who have now the leadership that has come up through the ranks a little bit recognizes the need, like that first call. And to be fair, so do the critical incident stress teams. They are also recognizing that, and so like they'll make sure, hey, don't forget to invite your dispatchers to this rodeo. Like
Yeah.
they need to be there because they're the first line. They're the people that heard that. Like they're the person that may have talked to that person before they left this blessed earth. You know, like it's like it's a different
Mhm.
dynamic for us because, as I said, we're in that moment. Nobody else is in that moment with the caller except the dispatcher, because by the time patrol or fire or EMS gets on scene, it's minutes later where like they're starting to now process that mental health chain, you know, that the steps of grief, whatever, that they're starting to process, but you're in that first initial like moment with them,
Yeah.
and you're experiencing that trauma with them. And that's
Mm.
different than arriving and being able to render help. That's a totally different concept, because at least if I'm physically on scene, and as somebody who could be physically on scene, I was able to get there and help and actually physically be in that presence and be like, okay, I've got it. Where like
Mm.
your job is to just make sure the person can help in some way, or try to get them to help, or try to let them be a part of what, you know, okay, we're gonna breathe for your baby. I need you to do that, you know, and
Mm.
that's where it's different. It's not the same, because when I get on scene, I'm taking over.
Yeah.
Type A personality is taking over. But as the
Mhm.
dispatcher, I got to check my type A, and
Yeah.
I have to talk to that person. I have to talk them through that event. It's a much different concept. And for years, that was like we were. How hard can it be? You answer the phone and you send people.
Yeah. Th- So true. So true. And I think one of the big things that I noticed when I first went through my academy, went through my training, is that they had a whole peer support segment, like through my academy, like had the officers who ran our peer support team come in, did a whole presentation, how to cope, tools to put in our tool belt, like the whole thing. Um, which I was a little surprised by it getting
Good.
into the field. I was just like, why why we need this? Like,
What
like,
am I getting into exactly?
and
This
then
seems fishy.
well, no, we talked about this fully. I mean, um,
Is there
and
somewhere I can get out of this contract? Because I'm not sure this is okay. I get
um, but what would you say is some advice that you would give to a dispatcher who's maybe dealing with the tough call, who may not be feeling so supported at their comm center? And like, do you have a tool that you've utilized over the years, that has kind of helped you process those tough calls and get through them? And
So there's a number of things. I think, like you said, as the conversation starts to change, there's more dispatchers that are willing to listen to each other. So like your peer support is there. You know, it's also like demand it from your leadership.
mm,
Don't be afraid to go in and be like, that was a hard call. I need a minute and I need to talk that out. You know, and again, that is leadership driven, and that's I'm an anomaly in New Jersey. I'm completely civilian, never sworn, came from dispatch, born and bred in dispatch, and went up through the ranks. And we don't have a lot of this that doesn't fall under a law enforcement umbrella, where like you're reporting to a police officer or fire chief.
mm,
Um, we had like, so the difference with them is like they know both me and the deputy are dispatchers, born and bred. So like for them,
mm,
they can come here, and we try to make it as safe as possible for them. And we also make sure that, you know, we open avenues to them, or we get them help. One thing that I impress upon them all the time is, if you need to step away from that desk, call us and we'll go out there and fill that gap for a little bit.
mm,
But as far as like for those centers where the support doesn't exactly seem to be there, um, don't wait for it to come. Like they may not come to you. My old center didn't come to me in the very beginning. I mean, they do now, thankfully, for their people. At least I think they do, from what I hear.
mhm,
Um, but they they weren't going, like, it was like there was no carrot in front of me, and they weren't like, hey, come get it if you want it. It was like it was just not there. And
yeah,
the more I started like speaking up and talking about it, the more I realized it was also laughed at. And that's a
mm,
really hard thing to get through. But find your own support. Like, don't be afraid to go and find a therapist. Read books on it if you're not sure. Or I'm not a person who likes to be in like in person with people. Not that I think everybody's got cooties. My time is limited, man. Get me on
Yeah.
Zoom, get me via text. Like I'm good, but I
Yeah.
have, like barely any time to myself. So I found like Talkspace.
Yeah. Okay.
And what I loved about Talkspace was when you go to a regular therapy session, you spend like 45 minutes and they get stuck on one thing, and you've got like a list, like a bullet point list of 20 things, and you're like, hey, I want to get all of these in, but they get stuck on like the one thing. And then by the time you get to like your 2 week later appointment, you've got another bullet list of 20, but you still got 20 from last time. With
Yeah.
Talkspace, you could write that all out and they
Hmm.
respond. Now, granted, it's expensive, but it's worth it. I found that was super helpful for me, was having that ability to write it down, reread it, kind of put my thoughts into play, and like just write it out. I didn't have to hit
Hmm.
send if I didn't want to, but when I did hit send, there was somebody who was specific to first response, somebody who was specific to post traumatic stress disorder in the workplace. Like that's what she did, and she knew how. Like there was one day, she's actually the one who was like, I jokingly said, "Hey, my PTSD," and she's like, "Hold, back up, back over
let's
that."
let's talk about
Yeah,
that.
let's reel it back in. She's like, I know
Hmm.
you joke about it, but I think we need to. And she like bang bang bang, like this is why you suffer from PTSD. You have this, you have this, you have this, and I'm sitting there like reading it, like oh, I do have those things,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that that's what it was. How would I?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it's important that you speak up, number one, and number two, you find whatever resource or whatever avenue works for you, and not to be afraid to, if you can't find that place, to kind of come to somebody else, find a peer, find somebody you trust in that space. And if you don't, call me, I'll
Hmm.
help.
Yeah.
you
You
know
know, one thing especially about like, therapy or resources is that the same thing doesn't work for everybody, right?
right.
So like how Talkspace and that virtual connection works for you might not work for someone else, but it might work for someone. So thank you so much for bringing that. I've heard Talkspace, especially pandemic, like therapists were super hard to find during the pandemic. So
Yeah.
a lot of people did start using the virtual spaces to, seek some help and some guidance. And it's awesome to hear that it worked for you and it's a good resource.
Yeah, and again, I have another dear friend of mine who prefers, they can't do the talk space and has to do the in person, but also that's finding the right therapist, because sometimes it's not the right therapist either.
Yes.
So you
Hmm.
have to make sure that that's also working. And if you don't feel like you're getting any headway, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to go
Yeah.
somewhere else. It's okay to ask other
Hmm.
people's opinions. Like, hey, do you have a therapist that works for you? Like, talk about it. That's
Yeah.
the biggest part. That is the key, is talk about it. Because for you,
Hmm.
if you didn't talk about these things, and like you said, you're seeing that peer support now. You're seeing that shift a little bit. You're seeing that they're bringing them up in academies now, and they're like trying to tell you, hey, this job isn't as easy as you. That's important. It's imperative that we drive those conversations, because we're the only ones that can, for
Yeah.
the next generation.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, I recently I had a critical incident and, I work graveyard and I woke up and I had a text from peer support at like 0800. And it was like, I got off at 06, the incident occurred overnight and I had a text by 08,
Right.
um, they were like, sorry, I hope I didn't wake you. And I was like, don't worry, my do not disturb is always on once I get off shift,
For
you
real.
know.
That's a
But
trick you learned very early in
right,
your career.
like honey, no, no one will wake me up. Don't worry. But
Just short of the bomb landing on my house.
oh my god, we had a tsunami warning here in the Bay Area because I'm like a block away from the water,
Lovely.
and I woke up to this message at like 2, and it was a tsunami warning. And I was like, I called my dad. I was like, you know where I live? Like, you better call me twice, make sure I wake up.
Yep.
Your graveyard friends are not getting this
No,
message.
we're
Like,
not.
we are
No.
sleeping through it.
Yes.
That's terrible. But
Yes.
um, they reached. It was nice. Like the call didn't the call didn't bother me. I had a good response to it, but it was very comforting knowing that I was included, and I was included. It the manner and the timing made me feel like I was a first thought inclusion, and not an afterthought. Not like, oh, by the way, did you text dispatch as well? It felt very intentional that they reached out to me that quickly. The same as any of the patrol guys and girls, I was the same level. And that's really impactful, even for when it's not a tough call in the sense where I'm not carrying it with me, maybe the way someone else might be. That still resonated with me. It made me feel good about
Right.
the
And
job
it's
I
not
did,
really
and
about it being so difficult. It's about, am
mm-hmm,
I being appreciated for what I'm doing? And
mm-hmm,
it's like it starts with the smaller steps, because now the next time you do have a critical call, you're going to know that there's people that care enough about you so that if you don't handle or process that call well, you still know
mm-hmm,
that there's people there that you could fall back on. Where
mm-hmm.
like a lot of times it was lost in space, right? Like we were just like,
Yeah.
like I said, they swung the door open, you good? Okay, great. And it's like, so there isn't that anymore. Like my
Yeah.
deputy director, she's lovely and she QAs tons of calls, and she'll every now and again she'll like pull the headphones out of her ear and just be like, oh, and I check on her. But also if there's an extreme call, I'll be like, make sure you check on that dispatcher as you're queuing that, because she, weekly she's going through that, and we'll make
Yeah.
phone calls to them and we'll bring them in. Sometimes it's just a matter of feeling valued as an employee.
Mhm.
And even if you're good with the call, it's that, where am I valued in the chain of response?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Exactly.
difficult, because I feel like
Yeah.
we weren't valued at all. And it's
Mhm.
only now becoming, hey, you're a valuable member of this chain. Let's do something with you.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and even, like, going through my, my journey with the Raspy Dispatcher, and, like, even seeing, like, the comments change in, like, like, "Oh, I'm really excited, like, this is a career that I'm really excited about, and, like, thank you for putting this information out. I've always wondered about it, and, now I'm gonna apply," and, like, the conversation even in those spaces, I feel has shifted in the
Yeah.
last couple of years that I've been doing this, that we're getting more people really interested in making an impact in getting into these centers, and hopefully decreasing our mandatory overtime, and, um, putting us in
I feel
good
like that is
spaces.
never gonna go away, no matter how
My
many
fingers are
times.
crossed. We're
Yes,
gonna.
I'm telling you, man. Like I keep calling my overtime like blood money at this point. Like
Oh
it's
my gosh.
we
So
just can't keep up. We can't
yeah,
keep up. The world needs more dispatchers so we
the
can
world
stop.
needs more dispatchers. That is the truth. I do have a question, and you probably won't. Um, it's totally off topic. So you worked at Rutgers.
I did.
Okay. And I'm a big basketball fan. Did you ever meet Vivian
I
Stringer?
did.
Oh!
I did.
Oh
So
my
one of
gosh.
my favorite standbys. So the way they organize it over there with the EMS is you've got the trucks that are on duty, and then you've got standby. NCAA, all of them require that
Mm,
there are EMTs, two of them standing on the sidelines at every time. Like every time they
oh,
otherwise they
so
can't go
lucky.
live.
Yeah.
So we actually stood just underneath the pep band. That's where we stood. And Viv was awesome. She was a really nice human being.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. And the girls were just phenomenal players. I mean, I'm 5'2", so they were really phenomenal players. Um, um, but just she was so during, like, because we could see them in practice too, but for the most part during games, she was so reserved and calculated in how she treated her
Mm,
ladies. um,
mm.
she was really a lot of fun to watch.
Oh my
I even
gosh.
I know Eric Legrand too. I don't know if you know his story, but
Wow.
he ended up with a cervical injury and he's paralyzed at one
Oh.
of our games. It was an away game, and actually it was the weirdest response of all the EMTs that went to go watch the game in the stadium. He
Mhm.
went down, and everybody who was an EMT from Rutgers stood up in the stands and like wanted to run to him, and like they ran
Mhm.
down as far as they could get because they knew immediately something was wrong. So yeah,
Wow.
so but Rutgers was by far my most favorite job. I had an incredible group of people that I worked with, an incredible leadership team that was over there, incredible training center. Lee's one of my great friends. He heads up the training over there. They're phenomenal. But it was so diverse. It was the first place that I had ever worked where I wasn't like, all jobs don't suck. You know, like
Yeah.
I'm like, are I supposed to hate coming here? Like that's hard, right? Like, but it really, like, I enjoyed the hell out of it. I did. They had all sorts of things that would happen on campus, you know, so you ran into
Mhm.
people all the time. It was fun. I would do it again in a heartbeat in my spare time.
Ah, so cool. Like spare time, what's that?
I had spare time at some point because I did that part time, but I
Yeah.
don't know where the spare time went. But yeah,
Yeah.
he's a little old girl.
Oh.
He has all my spare
Oh.
time.
So cute. Oh yeah, I love Vivian Stringer. She's one of my favorite coaches. She's actually, if I can remember correctly, she's one of the first people to implement a practice team, and she brought boys in as a practice squad to play against her ladies. So they would, like, regular students would come in, basically try out for the practice squad, and they would suit up. They had their uniform, and they would go at her team and just like get them ready for
Yeah,
for their competitions. And it was just like, what do you mean? Like, this is just phenomenal. So
yeah.
I'm fangirling a little bit that you got to be sidelined with Vivian
I
Stringer.
did. She was great. She was great, though. I will tell you, I know how into basketball you are, and I'm sad that you never got because I could have got you in over the Raps.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, right? Dang it.
yeah, it was
I'm
great.
just gonna I'm just gonna start sending emails and be like, hey, Keely told me that I could come.
Totally could come visit and check on your
Yeah.
basketball. Basketball and soccer were the two things that I would actually stand by at and be in the field with. I loved doing both of them. It was really just a great time. Unfortunately, for like football games and bigger events, I was immediately thrust into the EOC because I'm a dispatcher. So
Yeah.
but I did when I got to get out there. Basketball was definitely on my number one. I like
Oh, how fun. How fun. Um, so you also, I'm gonna hype you up a little bit here. Last year, and especially since I'm going to APCO for
that.
the first time.
A little jealous. A little jealous.
So
I'm
well,
very
I'm well, I'm honored because you were director of the year, APCO Atlantic chapter in
wow.
2021. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you. That was a humbling moment in my career, and it was because that's
yeah.
all peer nominated. So
Wow.
that was they left. I just walked into work one day and they had this big packet just sitting on my desk. They never told me they did it,
Oh,
anything of the sort. And then
oh.
I get a phone call from my deputy, and she was like, "Hey, you have to go to Vermont." And I was like, "Why?" She's like, "Cause you won the director of the year." But our like so we had a telecommunicator of the year, trainer of the year, and director of the year was all in our center for Atlantic APCO. So that was really like we
Wow.
swept the races there unintentionally,
Hey,
um,
yeah, good stuff.
unintentionally. But that I have probably the best group of people that work here. They really
Mhm,
there's always the anomaly and there's one or two that are always like just problematic. But really,
mhm,
it's so small here that they are their own family and
mhm.
they take care of each other. At least they try to. But of course, that's not without burnout.
Yeah,
Um, they're burnt out. We're short staffed, as are all the other ones in the nation.
yeah,
We're trying desperately to start thinking outside the box for hiring. That's why I did the whole QR code, like apply here, do this.
yeah,
I did the video. Like I'm trying to think as far out of the box. I'm gonna go to career fairs and get out there and speak on everybody's behalf in the nation at this point because we all
yeah.
need the help, and so that was a very humbling experience. Never in my career did I think I would be a director, number one. Didn't think I was going to stick around to be a dispatcher. And certainly never imagined that I would win an award of any type to do what it is that I do. Like, why? We don't give us awards. Like,
what's that? Accolades,
we don't give
appreciation. Boom, boom. No.
So that was very sweet, and
Yeah,
I'm a little jealous that you're going to Anaheim.
I'm so excited.
I legitimately, up until Friday of last week, did not know if I was going to go or not.
Oh,
I
no.
finally made the decision not to go because after I looked my 8-year-old in the face and told him that mommy had to go away for a couple of days, he burst into tears.
Oh.
And I was already on the fence because we're short-staffed. So one
Yeah.
event and they're screwed. And, while I try not to work on the desk as much because I am rusty, but, I obviously, if they need something, I help. And I just can't justify flying across the country while they're working 900 hours of overtime,
Yeah, no, I totally, but you know what? That's what's leading me to my next point is that one of the biggest things that I felt going between agencies, leadership really matters in the center. And for folks who are watching this, who are in leadership positions, what is some advice you can give them about impacting their center in a positive way? Because we know the job's hard. We know the hours are long. We know the mandatory overtime is crucial. But I think, in my experience, having a supervisor who's kind of willing to get in the mud, acknowledge kind of the dumpster fire that is dispatch sometimes, goes a long way to making people feel valued and lessening the burnout feeling and impact, I think. So as someone you're loved by your staff, you're nominated for these awards because of what you're doing in these centers and how you're impacting these people who are already doing this tough job. What is your advice to someone who's in a similar role as you and maybe having a hard time in their center?
It's so cliche, but don't forget where you came from. And I know that is like the biggest cliche line because there's a line, right? Like I have to, it's like, it's not personal, it's business. I have to sometimes draw the line and be like, sorry guys, got to change the schedule because I need to spread the wealth a little bit, and I also am very transparent. I want to say transparent. What I want to say is I am real. Like if something's upsetting me or bothering me or a decision I make has to be made, I'm not afraid to tell them that I'm uncomfortable with something. So like I said, it's not really transparency. It's more just being a legitimate human being that I may not be okay with a decision that I have to make, but I know I have to make it for the betterment of the center, or perhaps there's a personnel issue I have to deal with that I don't like. I think a lot of times it gets lost in translation a little bit. Like the staff thinks that the administrators don't understand, or perhaps maybe they're making decisions and it's like, I don't come out, I don't wake up in the morning, I'm like, I'm going to upset the apple cart and change everybody's schedule. I don't do that. The last thing I want to do is change a schedule. It is just as taxing on me as it is on the people who I have to shift around. But I think I let them know, I have feelings. I have emotions with my dispatchers. I try and I don't forget to laugh with them because there's some funny things that happen in the center, and there's no reason why I have to be so strict. There's no reason why I have to sit here and be like, this is the administrative side of the wall and we don't talk like that. Obviously, we're a bunch of dispatchers. We have some of the strangest minds on the planet. And some of the stuff they do is funny. It's okay. Laugh a little with them. Let them laugh. Let them do dumb things as long as it is not impacting their jobs and not allowing them to provide quality service. Have a little bit of fun with it. These guys sometimes they've got this porcelain doll that they throw around. They named her Mini Rachel. She's terrifying. And you'll find that doll. You'll open a cabinet, and that doll will be there.
Oh my God, that's hilarious!
Let it happen. Like, don't be so strong-willed and strong-fisted that you think that because you're now an administrator that you can't be like in the mud with them a little bit, that you can't feel that with them, and that you can't relate. Again, I will help them. Like, it's I a couple weeks ago we had a major accident occur on one of our highways. All I heard while sitting at my desk was my name being screamed from the other room. I reached in my drawer, grabbed my headset, and I ran on the floor, and I was like, I heard you, I'm logging in. By the time I picked up my desk, I had pulled everything out of my drawer. I had like a camera in my hand. I had like paperwork.
Oh my God. Picks up the desk, walks into the room with their own desk.
Pretty much how that happened. And you have to be that way. You have to be willing. Like, I'm not unwilling to come in. Most of the time, my deputy, because she's a beautiful soul, she'll take the shifts because she works a block from work. So she'll be like, nope, you stay where you are, blah, blah. I also have the capabilities currently to remote in from home, and I can at least call take and just like put it in the CAD from home. So I have no problem hopping on if they're like hit. And
How is that? How is that experience dispatching in your PJs? I just feel like I couldn't do it.
So this was back to thinking outside the box. Starting in the pandemic, I was alone and my insides felt like jelly because my director had just left. And again, I wasn't afraid to say that to my people. Here I am, the interim director. A pandemic has just broken out. I have no idea what I'm doing. And my entire world was right here. That's all I was given from the previous director, and like 2 15-minute trainings on like how to pay your people and pay the bills so that you don't shut off the lights. I was mortified. Like I was scared. I was terrified. I was like embarrassed because I was like, how did this happen? I was scared. And I didn't have a hard time telling them that. And that's like, you have to be like, I was afraid. I was scared. I was scared for them because I didn't know what it even meant. I felt terrible having to ask these people to come into work when they've got families and we don't know what's happening in the beginning of COVID when everybody was kind of scared. I would personally sanitize the desks between shifts and UV light the desks so that like if anybody's exposed, it's me. Like but I had no problem telling them that I was afraid. And I had no problem like changing the schedule and saying like, look, I know this isn't ideal, but we need to change the schedule to keep you guys in family units while this is going on. Those moments, that beginning to end of all of that, and like me standing here going, this is all I have. It gives you that perspective a little bit where like, hey, listen, I'm scared too. And I'm not going to stand here and I'm put my brave face on. Like I'm scared too. And we're going to do this together and it's going to suck. And I'm not a fan of what just happened because here I am alone. But these guys were great. They were showing up at my desk. Like, what can I take off your desk? What can I do? Can I help you with something? Can I take over the schedule for you so that, you don't have to deal with that? I mean, it was a hell of a like 4 or 5 month span there where like you just you lost sight of everything. And so I think when you look back at your career as a leader, do you want to be the person that ruled with the iron fist and didn't go out there and get a little bit dirty with them, or do you want to be the person that kind of sat in it? So I had to think of other ways. Like, what else can I do to try and help these people? So I found, I was watching Virginia. Actually, Virginia had some remote dispatchers, and I was like, how did they do that? So then I called everybody I knew. How did you do that? Yeah. So eventually I ended up with the technology. We got it deployed a couple months ago because that's how long it took because, COVID.
Word.
All right. And I took my first 911 call from my basement just a few months ago. Wow. And like I can use my portable from my basement, but I'm not that far. And so I can at least portable to portable.
Okay.
and I know I could deploy it to a couple people. The problem is that when it comes to like the radio aspect of it, we can't do that yet. Yet, because I'm gonna get there. If that's the last thing I do in my
Look, if anybody's gonna do it, I believe it's you. So
like, we're gonna have remote capabilities because I cannot compete with private sector right now because they are offering remote opportunities, more money, sign-on bonuses, and meanwhile I'm over here with a contract, and I'm like, I can't do anything right now.
right.
So, and that we're not losing people to become cops and firemen anymore. We're losing them to private sector,
Yeah.
and I get it. Like, I totally get
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
what can I do? Can I try this remote and maybe it'll loosen the load a little bit, like, and kind of be like, okay, well, I need you in. Can you at least call take from your house?
Yeah.
And I'll have the dispatchers that are here do the radio portion, call taker, call dispatcher. They do that all over the country. A
Yeah.
lot of places, believe it or not, New Jersey's an anomaly, right? Like, we call take and dispatch from the same place. Usually it's like, the same 5 square mile town, and everybody's doing that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we could do that, right? Call take,
Yeah.
call dispatch. Why not?
Yeah.
So
So cool. So
working on
awesome. Yeah. Well, one thing you said that I think resonates in regards to like supervising and being honest with the people you're working with is to be vulnerable. And I think being vulnerable allows connections to be formed. And I'm gonna run through a brick wall for someone who's honest with me, who shows me that they're human, who I can connect with, who I can relate with.
right.
And I think when you stood up there and were just like, here's my floppy disk, like we're running on fumes right now. I don't know. The computer might turn on. There's a pandemic outside. Like, we'll see what happens. I think when people are honest with people they're leading like that, it makes me as the person who's following want to help them,
Right.
want to support them, want to be a teammate. And I think that's the probably the culture you've created since taking over your center. And I think it's a great example for those to follow.
Yeah. The vulnerability factor is, and that's a hard thing to do as a leader, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to lead. I'm trying to be in charge, and at the same time, it's like, what am I really in charge of? Like, payroll,
Yeah.
budget. Like, I'm trying to lead people through an incredibly difficult job who deal with traumatic incidents, vicarious trauma. They deal with all sorts of things that the average human being does not see, hear, smell, or otherwise. So when you talk about that in context, what do I want them to know? I want them to know that my door is open. I want them to know that if it means that I've got to walk them to a doctor's office, if it means that I have to sit here and cry with them because their cat died, it you know it's different leadership now. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the same as it once was before, because we acknowledge that there's so much more to the environment that we work in, and so much more in this space. So, you know, maybe we need to shift that dynamic too. And the only way that starts happening is with the leadership. You gotta humble yourself a little bit, remember where you came from, and don't forget that you're still a human, and that, like, how would it feel if you were that human in there doing 60 hours of overtime a week? you
Yeah.
know it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever I can do to try to lighten that a little bit from them, or let them just have a little bit of fun, we'll do that. you know that's what
So
matters.
cool. So great. Well, I usually be like, hey, what's the last piece of gem that you can leave? But I feel like you left us with like a huge gem on our way out the door. So I'm not even gonna ask that question because I think that is an excellent uh tool for people to add to their tool belt to leave folks with. But if people are wanting to, reach out to you, connect with you, maybe they have some ideas in their center, maybe they want to go to remote, want to know how you did it, how can they reach you?
They can find me everywhere. I'm everywhere. um, I have LinkedIn accounts. I've got Instagram accounts.
Awesome.
But the easiest way is email info@npsm, November Papa Sierra Mike 911.org. That goes right to my inbox. They like it to say that it doesn't go to my inbox, but it goes right to me. So, and you can use my actual K Heyman at npsm91.org too. I get that just as much as I get the info one. So you can look me up anywhere, social media.
Awesome.
Find me anywhere.
Perfect. And I'll include, if you're trying to hurry up and write all those phonetics down, I am going to include the links in the info. So don't stress. It's all going to be there to reach out to Keely if you have any questions and want to connect with her for any reason. And thank you so much. I've had a great time talking with you, and I've learned so much. So I really appreciate you being willing to jump on with me.
Anytime. I don't mind it. Just reach out. You know how to find me.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm gonna kick you out and I'll come right back to you, okay?
Yep.
All right, everybody, that's it for another episode of Let's Talk Dispatch here on the Raspy Dispatcher. Thank you so much for joining us today. Keely, thank you so much. So much great information about being a supervisor, taking over a center during a pandemic, and just your journey in dispatch. Thank you so much for showing up and being vulnerable with me today. I really appreciate it. If you want to jump on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, you can send me a message, go to the raspydispatcher.com and sign up for a time that works for you. I want to talk to anyone and everyone that has something wonderful to share in regards to the world of dispatch. Of course, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, all that good stuff. And until next time, stay raspy, everybody.